CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories.
Took long, hard years of work to get to this place.
US President Joe Biden calls for the return of power-sharing government in Northern Ireland on his historic trip to Belfast, marking 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement. Our other headlines: Brazil's president is on his way to China for a state visit with trade and investment top of the agenda. Italy declares a state of emergency over its spiralling migrant crisis, with 3,000 people arriving on its shores in the last few days. And secrets and spies. More revealing details emerge following the alleged leak of highly classified Pentagon documents. US President Joe Biden has called for the power-sharing government in Northern Ireland to be restored while on his historic trip to Belfast. Biden made his comments in a speech marking the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, which ended 30 years of violence. He said protecting peace in Northern Ireland is something that brings America together. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Peter Oliver in Belfast. Peter, Biden's speech was almost a challenge to the political parties at Stormont to get back to negotiations. What else did he have to say?
Well, yeah, before he issued, essentially, as you say, that challenge to those political parties here in Northern Ireland, he spoke about the dark days of the Troubles, the sectarian violence that tore Northern Ireland apart for 30 years, saying that it was unthinkable when he visited here in 1991 that there would be a building like the nearly $400 million new campus here at the Ulster University that he was opening with so much glass. It would have just been impossible to build that type of thing here in the centre of Belfast. He spoke about the hard work that had gone in by parties here in Ireland, on the island of Ireland, also in the United Kingdom and in the United States, to make the Good Friday Agreement what it was, that peace deal that brought about an end to those 30 years of violence. He talked about George Mitchell, the senator who chaired those talks, the US senator, saying that George Mitchell talked about 700 days of failure leading to 1 day of success in getting that agreement over the line. He said that the United States had a close link and a close interest in following the peace here in Ireland, in Northern Ireland. What he did say, though, was when it came to the Northern Ireland Assembly, which was created out of the Good Friday Agreement, that power-sharing relationship between nationalists and unionists at a political level, which currently isn't in session right now, that he wished it could be back in session, but that it was up to the parties and the people of Northern Ireland to make that happen.
I hope the Assembly and the Executive will soon be restored. That's a judgment for you to make, not me, but I hope it happens. Along with the institutions that facilitate North-South and East-West relations, all of which are vital pieces of the Good Friday Agreement. For in politics, no matter what divides us, if we look hard enough, there are always areas that are going to bring us together if we look hard enough.
Peter, how will the speech go down with both Republicans and Unionists in the province?
Well, when we look at the nationalist Republican side, Joe Biden was always going to be welcomed here. He is seen as an ally by that side of the political divide here in Northern Ireland. It's perhaps more interesting to look at how this is being viewed from the unionist side. Before he headed here to Northern Ireland, Joe Biden had said that he was going to prod and nudge the DUP, the largest pro-British union party in the Northern Ireland Assembly, to try and get them to go back into the Northern Ireland Assembly, because the fact that they pulled out of that is the reason that it is currently not in operation. Now, that had prompted some commentators here to suggest that Joe Biden could potentially do more damage than good if he was to cajole and apply too much pressure to the DUP. What we've heard from Jeffrey Donaldson, though, the head of the DUP, is that that wasn't the case, that it was a soft touch from Joe Biden. Jeffrey Donaldson saying he was certainly not here to interfere. That's the quote from the leader of the DUP. So he has said that they should get back to work and get back into Stormont, but it certainly wasn't the hard sell.
Peter, thank you for that. Our correspondent Peter Oliver in Belfast. Brazil's President Lula da Silva has started a state visit to China. He's leading a delegation of 240 business representatives, and more than 20 deals are expected to be signed during this trip. Apart from Shanghai, Lula will visit Beijing and meet his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping later this week. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Chen Tong at Shanghai International Airport, where President Lula's plane, we think, is about to arrive. Chen Tong, good to see you. What's on the Brazilian president's agenda?
Yes, Lula is expected to arrive in Shanghai anytime in the next 20 minutes, and a busy schedule for him tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, he will be attending the inauguration ceremony for the new president of the New Development Bank, and the new, which headquartered here in Shanghai. And the new president of the bank is actually the former president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff. And tomorrow afternoon, he will actually be visiting a Huawei Innovation Center here in Shanghai, and also meet some Brazilian entrepreneurs. It's actually Lula's fifth visit to China. His first time was actually in 2001, when he was the honorary president of the Workers' Party in Brazil, and then he came to China 3 times as the president of Brazil. And tomorrow evening, he will be head to Beijing to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. And as you mentioned, more than 200 delegation members are expected to come to visit China, and most of them are entrepreneurs. And then the two countries will be signing deals in industries including healthcare, education, agriculture, and finance. China actually has been Brazil's largest trading partner for almost 14 years, and 1/3 of Brazil's exports actually go to China. And just last month, the two countries signed a deal to ditch US dollar in favor of using their own currencies in trade transactions. So all these actually are showing how determined these two BRICS nations, these two emerging economies, to promote their mutual benefits. Back to you.
Chen Tong, thank you very much for that. Our correspondent Chen Tong at Shanghai International Airport. Well, China, as we were hearing, is one of Brazil's main customers for agricultural products, but it would still like to expand exports. Our correspondent Paulo Cabral reports now from the Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Norte.
This canary melon, being plucked off the ground in Brazil's northeastern state of Rio Grande do Norte, is bound for a long journey, all the way around the globe to customers in China. After a couple test runs last year to close contracts and study logistics, this large farm is now preparing to ship high volumes of its fruit to the Chinese market.
Está tudo bem encaminhado para que essa safra 2020-2023.
We are projecting that in the 2023 harvest, we will export between 100 and 200 containers per week to the Chinese market, not counting other Asian markets that are also interested in our products.
Fora os outros países asiáticos.
Now the company is working on licenses to also begin exporting watermelons to China, a more delicate and perishable melon variety.
It's very gratifying to be working to pick a fruit that will be shipped out of the country to feed other peoples in other cultures.
The farm's manager says logistics is the biggest hurdle in increasing exports to China.
We have many fruits in our country and here in our region, like mango, watermelon, banana, papaya, and exports have been increasing year after year. And with fruit exports, the big challenge is to get the products quickly to the final customers. So we need policies and measures to improve our logistics.
Rio Grande do Norte has ambitious plans to expand its trade with China, but for that, the state needs to increase its port capacity. Despite Rio Grande do Norte's favorable geographical location, it's the shortest Atlantic crossing between South America and Africa. The state's main port has berths for only 3 vessels, and the bridge right at the canal's entrance limits their size. The state secretary says talks are already underway with one of China's biggest engineering firms on construction of a new port, and hopes President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's visit to China will help cement the project.
Mas esse porto será multiuso.
It will be a multi-purpose port. We could export our iron ore there. We have proven reserves of 600 million tons of iron ore. We also produce much salt, and we are exporting only half of it, simply for not having a better port. and also our traditional products such as fruits like melon.
Eu estou falando em produtos tradicionais. A nossa fruta, o melão, por exemplo.
China has just lifted a one-month ban on Brazilian beef tied to an isolated case of mad cow disease. For the foreseeable future, some key commodities like beef and soy are likely to be the main exports to China. But diversification could help ease the negative impacts when problems arise with any one product. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, Natal, Brazil.
Italy's cabinet has called a state of emergency following a rise in migrant crossings the Mediterranean from North Africa. In the last few days, 3,000 migrants have landed in the country, with the Coast Guard having to rescue 2,000 of them. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Alex Fraser in Milan. Alex, tell us more about the scale of this problem and why has there been this rise in migrants arriving now?
So over 30,000 migrants have already arrived this year. So to give you an idea, that's the highest number on record here in Italy. And as you'd expect, the Italian government has reacted. Back in February the 26th, 93 people drowned off the coast of Calabria. And at the time, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni responded by saying she'd increase prison sentences for human traffickers. And effectively, they've gone a bit further than that now with this decree. It comes at a time when thousands have been rescued across this weekend, many of them landing at the small island of Lampedusa in the Mediterranean. The government has said, as of last night, that the small island's infrastructure simply cannot cope with the sort of numbers it's been seeing. There is a migrant shelter there, the kind of first port of call for migrants when they arrive in Italy, and that has capacity for about 300 to 400 people. Well, during the last few days, it's had around 3,000 people. So we're at a stage where clearly that's not suitable for purpose at the moment. The government say they're going to be running ferries to the mainland from there to try and alleviate that, but that's certainly a bad position to be in. And we've seen over the last few days a number of boats arriving, a number of boats in distress. 2 boats sank off the coast of Tunisia on Saturday, 4 people drowned, and this morning another fishing vessel was pulled in by tugboat into the port of Catania in Sicily with 700 people on board. So the government's clearly felt that it needed to do some sort of reaction and has therefore put out this state of emergency.
And Alex, in real terms, in practical terms, what does this state of emergency actually mean, and is it going to work?
Well, it sounds like something quite dramatic, doesn't it, a state of emergency. The reality is, in Italy, it's something used to cut through some of the bureaucracy. The government putting in €5 million, that's about $5.4 million US dollars. They say it's going to speed up the processing and repatriation of migrants, and for Giorgia Meloni and her party Fratelli d'Italia, that was a major election promise from her. The government have tried everything that they see to deter people crossing. They've targeted the NGO boats that rescue people in the Mediterranean, and where they've been fighting those NGOs in the courts and denying them port access. But the reality is that this is all about the EU's response. Giorgia Meloni has made no secret in that she wants a lot more help from the EU, whether that's financial help or whether that is in terms of quotas per EU state. But we'll have to see whether these measures are even going to be very effective at all, and if the EU will even get involved after this.
Alex, thank you for that. Our correspondent Alex Fraser in Milan. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, tech in trouble, how jitters in the City of London are affecting UK startups.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
The There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. US President Joe Biden calls for the return of power-sharing government in Northern Ireland on his historic trip to Belfast, marking 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement. Our other headlines: Brazil's president is on his way to China for his state visit, with trade and investment top of the agenda. And Italy declares a state of emergency over its spiralling migrant crisis, with 3,000 people arriving in the last few days. Well, more details are emerging following the leak of alleged US classified intelligence documents. It could have an impact on the Ukraine conflict, as well as relations between the United States and its allies. While the files have not been verified so far, the alleged claims are revealing. The alleged leak has raised several questions about the military preparedness of Ukraine regarding the spring offensive. The documents have also revealed the presence of special forces from several NATO countries on the ground in Ukraine, including the UK, the United States and Latvia. Some of these files appear to show evidence that the United States is spying on several countries, including allies South Korea and Israel. Well, our correspondent Jack Barton has more now on the reaction from Seoul.
Well, it certainly comes at a bad time for the Yoon government, because President Yoon Suk-yeol will be heading to Washington later this month to have a face-to-face meeting with President Joe Biden. And whether these are fabrications or true, this is no doubt going to come up as a talking point between the two leaders. We've heard again from the Foreign Minister today, Park Jin, who said most of the documents relating to South Korea were fabricated, but not all of them. So he's indicating there that some of them are indeed correct, but not saying which is which. The most damning among them, a conversation between two national security advisors of President Yoon Suk-yeol discussing the shipment of artillery shells to Ukraine, something that South Korea hasn't done. It's been under pressure from the US to do that. But whether it's real or not, of course, extremely uncomfortable. And for the opposition party, it's grounds for an independent inquiry. They're not just concerned about the fact the US seems to have been spying, and the opposition party says if it's true, they want an apology and they want to guarantee it will never happen again. They're worried about the nature of the information as it relates to the conflict in Ukraine, and they're also worried that this could have happened in President Yoon Suk-yeol's secure bunker. The president paid a lot of money when he came to office to move from the Blue House, the former presidential office, into what was the Defense Ministry, believing it would be much more secure, particularly the bunker area where they hold the meetings. And that's supposed to be impregnable even to South Korean intelligence agencies. So if we find out where this leak is supposed to have occurred, and it happened in this sensitive area.
Well, our correspondent Yolo Davith has been following the story in Europe. What do you think we're learning from these leaks?
We're learning that the Pentagon are still conducting their investigation. They're trying to find out how many of these leaks come from the Pentagon. They haven't authenticated, of course, anything yet. But in terms of the Ukraine, first of all, we learn that there is possibly a degree of unpreparedness for their spring offensive. Why is that important? Because they've been sitting back and defending towns and cities in eastern Ukraine, and now to lift the morale of their own people and to try and encourage more weapons from the West and NATO countries to arrive, they want to show that they can attack the Russians in eastern Ukraine. These documents seem to show they may not be able to do that. And part of the reason for that is the old munitions that they have. They don't have enough anti-aircraft missiles, according to the documents. They don't have the SA-11 Gadfly or the S-300 missiles. They may run out of those next month. And the other thing that is very, very interesting and illuminating, if it's true, is the number of special forces now operating, we are told, in Ukraine. What's the role of the 50 special combat officers from Britain and 17 from Latvia, also French, American, and 1 Dutch special forces there? What are they doing? Are they training, or are they doing something else? Are they conducting surveillance, or are they doing sabotage? I met last month an NCO, a non-commissioned officer formerly from the US Marines in Kramatorsk, and he said what he could offer the Ukrainian military as a private individual and a former military man was to train the operatives and the people that they had there. That's what they needed most of all. But there's no details of the locations of these special forces. And the other thing, which I think is quite revealing, is the casualty figures which they claim to have, the Americans. 223,000 Russian military killed and wounded, and 130,000 for the Ukrainians. We've had these ballpark figures before, but, you know, if those figures are true, it shows the cost of this conflict for the last year.
Yolo, thank you very much. Our correspondent, Yolo Abdavith. London is Europe's leading hub for tech investment, but British startups have warned that funding is starting to dry up. Potential investors are becoming more risk-averse in the face of rising costs and the collapse of America's Silicon Valley Bank. Our correspondent Lee Juan Ha reports.
This is one of the United Kingdom's many social clubs. It is one of the many places people can go to socialize and enjoy live music. For visitors like me, seeking an authentic British night out is anything but easy. Now, an app developer is trying to promote small gigs like this and give them a fair chance to showcase their performances.
We're currently in a club just outside London, and we believe there are hundreds of clubs like this all around every city, around every country in the world. And our plan is to ensure that we can digitalise all of these venues to ensure that all the data that comes from these audiences can be used to drive more revenue for these bands.
But Mark says the biggest problem right now is fundraising. A report by Atomico, an international investment firm, has found that tech funding in the UK alone saw investment drop by 22% last year. Experts say the primary reason is high interest rates.
The primary driver is as interest rates go up, the value of stocks, because most of the money in these companies gets made in the future. Those numbers, may still be the same exact numbers as they were like, a year ago in terms of what they were projecting, but you discount them back by a much higher rate.
Hussein says investors are looking for startups that can potentially become winners in particular categories.
If you can build a new product or new service that kind of takes advantage of the new disruption, which is AI, and you can grow a brand new category and win that category, you can build a very, very large company.
For tech startups, ideas do matter. Yet the collapse of America's Silicon Valley Bank does make many investors and entrepreneurs in the UK have second thoughts on starting or backing a business.
I think it's really important to recognize how important SVB is in the tech ecosystem globally, particularly in the US and in the UK. If these companies don't have access to their funds, if they're not able to make payroll, which will be coming up very soon, if they're not able to pay the suppliers, and it's important to recognize that these companies are also the lifeblood of the innovation ecosystem.
This is the Silicon Roundabout area, also known as the East London Tech City. A cluster of tech startup companies started right from here over 10 years ago with the support of the UK government, but now the economic downturn has made many investors become pretty careful with every penny they spend. Li Jianhua, CGTN, London.
A diner at a Chinese restaurant in Sichuan province last year found more than just a good dinner, and the scientific community is still talking about it. The diner discovered a set of ancient footprints. And recently, a team of scientists validated the fossil as a 100-million-year-old dinosaur footprints. Our correspondent Tao Yuan reports.
Some big discoveries can come from the most unlikely places. Zhu Min walked past these pits every day to fetch water from the well. She liked the primitive touch they add to her restaurant courtyard, but never stopped to give them a second thought. Until last July, when a curious customer pointed out there might be something more to them.
A gentleman named Mr. O came to eat and he noticed the puddles had a certain pattern.
O Hongtao is a dino enthusiast.
It was truly a highlight moment of my life. I was drawn by the beautiful courtyard, and then I realized the puddles, each on its own. They were just ordinary holes, but together they formed a pattern that looked like the footprints of a very large cat or dog.
Southwest China's Sichuan Basin boasts some of the world's most significant dinosaur fossil discoveries. But the Leshan area has no skeletal record of the prehistoric animal. O couldn't be sure, so he took some photos and reached out to Professor Xing Li Da, a well-known paleontologist.
We receive nearly 100 tips each year. Most are forced reports. But Mr. O took a lot of photos, and I thought it looked like a real deal.
Professor Xing and his team flew from Beijing to Leshan.
We cleared the entire courtyard thoroughly. There was a lot of water in many of the footprints. We had to clean up the water, along with the moss and dirt. And then, in certain footprints, you can see depression left by the toes very clearly. I was 100% sure that these were footprints left by dinosaurs.
Recently, Professor Xing and a team of international scientists published their research findings, validating the footprints as tracks of the sauropod dinosaur, two youngsters dating back 100 million years in the Cretaceous period.
Sauropods are a fascinating group of creatures and were the largest land animals to have ever lived on Earth. The largest sauropods can reach over 40 meters in length. Imagine, these giant animals roamed the Earth for more than 100 million years.
Tao Yuan, CGTN, Leshan.
The headlines again. US President Joe Biden calls for the return of power-sharing government in Northern Ireland on his historic trip to Belfast, marking the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Our other headlines: Brazil's president is on his way to China for a state visit with trade and investment top of his agenda. Italy declares a state of emergency over its spiraling migrant crisis, with 3,000 people arriving in the last few days. And secrets and spies. More revealing details emerge following the alleged leak of highly classified Pentagon documents. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.